Hi, this is Tommy Stevens with K2 Enterprises, and I'd like to welcome you to another in a series of tips on how to get more from your technology. In this tip, we are going to focus on how you can take advantage of Excel's date tables feature to allow you to create more powerful pivot tables inside Power Pivot. More specifically, we're going to take a look at how date tables can help us automate the process of grouping our reports, of building our reports and analyses in Power Pivot based on fiscal reporting periods instead of calendar reporting periods. Now, of course, Power Pivot is causing many business professionals to rethink how they create reports and analyses. Frankly, it's not just Power Pivot, it's other tools as well, Power BI, and some of the other business intelligence tools that have popped up on the market over the past couple of years. But specifically to Power Pivot, for those who need to summarize data based on fiscal periods instead of calendar periods, reporting in Power Pivot can be a bit cumbersome and challenging. You see, Power Pivot does not allow us to do the custom grouping of dates that we would otherwise be able to perform in an ordinary pivot table in order to get fiscal year groupings. Now, fortunately, there's a very easy to use solution inside Power Pivot, and the name of this solution is Date Tables. And in this tip, you're going to learn how you can add date tables to your Power Pivot data models in order to speed the process of reporting based on fiscal periods. I guess we should start by asking and answering the question, what is a date table? And then secondly, how do we create a date table? I think perhaps the easiest way of explaining this in the simplest of all possible terms is that a date table in Power Pivot is nothing more than, let's call it a mapping table that contains transactional dates mapped into given fiscal periods. For example, notice the data that's currently on the screen. In column A, of course, we have an actual date column. And then notice in column B, I've created a mapping that says that, for example, January 1st, 2018 is in the third fiscal quarter, and I'm also mapping that into the appropriate fiscal year. In this example, we are assuming that we are on a July 1 through June 30th fiscal year. Therefore, all dates January 1 through March 31 are in my third quarter, April 1 through June 30, fourth quarter, etc. So, in looking at this, what I would like to be able to do is to take this table of dates, and by the way, I've extended this down for 10 years. Of course, you could extend for as long as you would like or as short as you would like, but I've taken this date table, created it for a 10-year period of time, and I want to upload this table of data into the Power Pivot data model so that I can build a relationship between the date table and the other tables inside the data model. Once that relationship is built, I'll then be able to build my reports based on these fiscal reporting periods identified in column B and column C. Now, this is really much easier to do than perhaps it sounds, so follow along with me. Step number one to building our date table is to, well, create the date table. And what I've done, obviously in column A, is I just typed in January 1st, 2018, January 2nd, 2018, and then, of course, I just did a click and drag approach to copy or to sequence those dates all the way through my 10-year period of time. Whether you choose to do that manually, by formula, copy, paste, however you need to enter your dates, or however you're going to get your dates into this table of data, then by all means, go ahead and get the data. I chose to put mine in column A. The second step is to create, let's call them maps, if you will, to map the date in column A, the actual transactional date in column A, into the appropriate fiscal reporting periods. Now, again, you can do this a number of ways, including manually typing the data. Of course, since I'm dealing with over 3,600 entries here, manually typing data into 3,600 rows times 2 columns, so pushing 8,000 cells, that would become very time consuming. Instead, in this example, I chose to enter a formula. And I used the ifs function that was added with Office 365. You could have used multiple nested if statements or any other formula that works for you. But in this case, I used the ifs function to look at the month in cell A2. And if you're not familiar with Excel's month feature, the month feature is pretty simple. It returns a value of 1 to 12, with January being 1, December being 12, and I'll let you fill in the other 10 in between. So we're looking at the month in cell A2, and that first section of this formula that currently that I'm highlighting right now that says month A2, that's returning, of course, a value of 1. Okay, because the month number of the month in cell A2 is 1. If we were looking at, let's say, July 1, 2018, the month function would be returning a value of 7. So if that value, if month A2 is less than 4, that is, if it's 1, 2, or 3, that is, if it's January, February, or March, then we know that we are going to be in the third fiscal quarter. On the other hand, if the month is less than 7, that is, if it's 4, 5, or 6, okay, April, May, or June, if it's less than 7, we are in the fourth fiscal quarter. And if the month is less than 10, that is, if it's 7, 8, or 9, July, August, or September, then we have to be in the first fiscal quarter. Now, keep in mind, we are assuming in this example that we're on a July 1 through June 30 fiscal year. So therefore, July, August, and September would be my first fiscal quarter. And then finally, if the month is less than 13, we have to be in the second fiscal quarter. Now, our focus in this session is not necessarily on that formula, but I wanted to take just a few moments and amplify that formula to make sure that you understand what's happening there. Again, however you choose to get the data into column B, by all means, get the data into column B. I chose to do it via formula. That way I only had to enter the formula in cell B2, copy it all the way down the range. And of course, once I copied that formula down the range, as I scroll through the range, you can see that it's automatically adjusting from one fiscal quarter, i.e. the second fiscal quarter there on row 366, to the third fiscal quarter on row 367. Now, when we're dealing with fiscal quarters, we are also necessarily dealing with fiscal years. What's the appropriate cutoff for my calendar year over into my fiscal year? And I used an if statement here, not ifs, but if. I used an if statement here to basically do the same thing that we were doing in the fiscal quarter column, only this time it's looking at the month in cell A2. And what we're saying is if the month is less than 6, then we want to return the year out of cell A2. But if it's anything less than 6, i.e. if it's greater than 6, then we want the year to be the year out of A2, which is 2018, plus 1. So whenever you're dealing with fiscal years, you have to map your calendar year into the appropriate fiscal year. We could have added additional columns out here on the right-hand side. For example, we could have gone in and added another column that actually spells out quarter 3 instead of just a value of 3. But to keep this illustration relatively simple, I chose to stop at 2 formulas. Once you have your actual dates, once you have your formulas in place to map the dates into the appropriate fiscal reporting periods, make sure, if you have not done so already, make sure that you convert this data into a table in Excel. Now, how do we convert a range of data into a table? That's pretty simple, of course. If you're a keyboard shortcut person, you could use a Control-T keyboard shortcut to make that happen. Or if you prefer, you can go to the ribbon, and there's any number of places on the ribbon where we could do this, including, of course, the Home tab of the ribbon. And from the Home tab of the ribbon, I could choose Format as a Table, pick my appropriate table design, whatever color scheme I wanted, and then I would have a table in place. What you may not realize about tables is once you convert this range of data to a table, and again, table is a technical term in Excel these days, you can also, if you desire, click on the Table Tools Design tab of the ribbon and then change the name of the table. Excel is going to name these tables in sequential order, table 1, table 2, table 3, etc. within the same workbook. I always prefer to change my table names so that they are truly reflective of the data that's contained in the table. So in this case, a little difficult perhaps for you to see on the video, but I changed the name of that table to July 1 fiscal year. One quick note there, make sure there's no spaces in that table name. Make sure your table name does not start with a number. In fact, if you try to create a table name that Excel otherwise disallows, Excel will be sure to let you know that, of course. So we have created our mapping table. And again, nothing terribly complex about creating the mapping table. We enter the dates. We generally, I would hope, via formula, would create some formulas that map those dates into the appropriate fiscal quarter, fiscal year, and any other reporting periods that you wanted. And then if we have not done so already, let's take that table, or let's take that range of data and convert it into a table. Now here's where the magic begins to happen. With this table created, we are going to upload it into the Power Pivot data model. And then inside the data model, we are going to indicate that we want this to be a date table. Okay, pretty easy to do. I will start by clicking on the Power Pivot tab of the ribbon. And I guess I should preface this by saying if you're not familiar with Power Pivot unfortunately is not in all versions of Excel. Power Pivot is an add-in reserved for those versions of Excel that are provided through Office Professional Plus and also Office Pro Plus. Office Pro Plus is available through an Office 365 subscription. Office Professional Plus is a volume license of Microsoft Office. This is an advanced feature of Excel, giving us the capability of doing some pretty heavy-duty data analysis, data crunching. So what I'm going to do is click on the Power Pivot tab of the ribbon, as I've done. I've already clicked inside my table, and very simply, I'm going to say I want to add this to my data model. I'm going to click and say add it to the data model. Now all of that data has been, shall we say, uploaded into the Power Pivot data model. A data model is simply multiple tables that we're going to link or relate together. Okay, that's all the data model is, multiple tables that we're going to link or relate together. And then once this data is inside the data model, from the Design tab of the ribbon, I'm going to say I want to mark it as a table. I'm sorry, mark it as a date table to be more specific. So I'm going to say I want to mark this as a date table. And I'm saying that the date, the actual date column inside that table, I need to specify that column because that is going to facilitate us doing what we call date and time intelligence functions inside Power Pivot. Now, the scope of this particular tip is not going to get into those date and time intelligence functions. We're going to limit strictly to grouping based on fiscal periods. But if you wanted to get into writing data analysis expressions inside Power Pivot, which are extremely powerful formulas, then being able to build these date and time intelligence functions off that actual date field, that actual date column inside our date table would be pretty important. Again, that's beyond the scope of what we're here to do in this particular tip. I'll simply click OK, and now I have added that, marked that as a date table inside Power Pivot. Let's close that Power Pivot window momentarily, or for just a moment, I should say. Let's go back to our normal Excel spreadsheet, and as you can see, I have some transactional data here. And what I want to do is take this transactional data and also add that to the data model inside Power Pivot. And then I want to go back and grab this product name table that's inside Excel and add that to the data model. So as you can now see, I have three different tables inside my data model in Power Pivot. I've got my date table, I've got my transactions table, which contains obviously transactional information, looks like some sales information, and then I have a product name table. And now the real magic of this is inside Power Pivot, let's go and build relationships using diagram view. Let's build relationships to link these three tables together, to relate these three tables together. From the July 1 fiscal year, that was the name that I gave to my date table, I'm simply going to drag that actual date field onto the order date field in the transactions table. And it did not matter which way I did that. That is, dragging from the date table to the transactions table or from the transactions table to the date table. It doesn't matter the order in which we do that. Now you can see that there is a relationship established between those two tables. Likewise, I am going to click on the product ID field from the transactions table and drag and drop that onto the product name. The product ID field in the product name table, and of course that creates a relationship between those two tables. And with these three tables now linked or related together based on the presence of those common fields, at this point we can now go build our pivot table. I'll click on Pivot Table, indicate that I want to put the pivot table into a new worksheet, and now notice that all three tables are available for me. And I'm going to, from the product name table, drag the product name into the rows quadrant. I'm going to, from the transactions table, take the extended price and drop that into the values quadrant. And now here's the magic of the date table. From the July 1 fiscal year date table, I'm going to take the fiscal year and the fiscal quarter and drop those into my pivot table. Now, for purposes of this demonstration, we're not going to worry too much about formatting. Obviously, this is a pivot table like all other pivot tables at this point, which means all of my formatting options would be available to me. Again, that's not the focus of this session. The focus of this session is look at how we're now able, inside Power Pivot, with this very, very easy to use date table feature, how we are now able to go in and group our data based on fiscal reporting periods, not based on calendar reporting periods. As you probably know, Power Pivot is a fantastic resource for summarizing and analyzing transactional data, including even potentially very large quantities of transactional data. Using Power Pivot, we can crunch potentially billions of rows of data. But a challenge arises if we need to build our reports on anything other than calendar reporting periods. Power Pivot makes that a bit difficult simply because you can't do custom grouping of dates inside Power Pivot. Fortunately, our date tables make it quite easy to use Power Pivot to summarize and analyze this data based on fiscal reporting periods. And as you saw, the steps behind using date tables in Power Pivot are really quite simple. Step number 1, create a table that maps the actual date to the appropriate fiscal periods. Step number 2, upload that table into your data model. Step number 3, mark that uploaded table as a date table. And finally, step number 4, relate the date table to the other tables in your data model. Do this, complete these 4 steps, and in no time at all, you'll be taking full advantage of all that date tables have to offer. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you have found this tip to be useful. For more information, please check out other videos that we have on our K2 channel or join us in one of our training programs. Thank you so much. Have a great day.